On this episode of On the Mic with Mike and Moose.
The real world's out there,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, whether it's, autistic kids that are having to deal with bullies or whatnot, or, you're trying to do your best to be Christ-like and you're struggling because you don't get to see your children as much. Greetings, welcome to episode 2 of On the Mic with Mike and Moose. This is your boy Moose coming to you live from just outside of Birmingham, Alabama, and
This is Mike all the way from God's country right here in Moore, Oklahoma. You remember it, the tornado capital of the whole world.
so this episode today we're talking a little bit about, it's called On Family Part 1. We're talking about raising them, loving them, and heartbreak. And Mike and I wanted to talk a little bit more on the personal side of, you know, how some of the events in my life have not only been heartbreaking to me, but also have been enriching to me because it's made my walk with God stronger. And I talk about, raising my daughter and dealing with some of the issues we've had. And then Mike, you were going to talk a little bit about your daughter as well, and dealing with a child who has been diagnosed with autism. So Mike, I'm gonna try my best not to break down, because even though I'm in a good place with my spiritual walk, when I bring up these feelings, the guttural feeling of going through a divorce was so devastating to me at the time, and we're talking, a decade ago, that the last time that I gave this testimony was just a little over a month ago, when I had friends in from Italy, and they had brought somebody down from Michigan who spoke Italian, an older couple. And the wife said, "Well, how did tell us your testimony? Tell us about how you got so strong in your faith." And so I started talking about it. And we're in the middle of Chick-fil-A, and I'm not gonna lie, I had to stop. And Jessica, being there, knowing how this affects me emotionally, even though we've been married happily for 8 years now, she knows that it was such a down part of my life. And then trying to navigate dealing with a child in a broken home, how difficult that's been. And so, we the thing about my first marriage is, I don't want to go into too many details. I don't want a sob story or anything like that. But just to kind of put it bluntly, it was not a biblical marriage. Um, we both were not really involved with church. I was in a dark place when this happened. The best thing that's come out of it has been my daughter, and I love her to death. And um, when we split, it took a year and a half to go through our divorce. And at this point, and like the first week when it happened, I didn't eat for a week. I lost 15 pounds. It was almost like I had COVID pre-COVID. Like that's kind of how I felt. And I was involved in church to an extent, but I was involved in church by myself. And I just you know the there's the Hobby Lobby signs and the religious signs, let go and let God. And at that point, it just had to happen. Um, and I never wanted to go through a divorce. Like, that was one of the things that scared me more than anything. My parents are divorced. My grandparents are divorced, and I wanted to break the cycle. And it just it was not in the cards for me to break that cycle. And after doing what I did to be able to get some time with my daughter, and then when I started dating my current wife, I said, God got me through this difficult time, and I'm going to make sure that I honor God by raising up my daughter in church was something that I never had as a child. And you gotta. And I tell this to people all the time. In about 2013, this was kind of the events. I was found out we were pregnant. My daughter was born. I bought a house right after she was born. I lost my job. I took a 40% pay cut at that job. And then at 10 months old, my daughter had open heart surgery. And then a year later, we were split. So within 2 years, I had seven, what I feel are seven major life changing events happen. And you just sit there and you just think, how much more can I take? And as I kind of alluded to this, I've alluded to this with you before, and we talked, I think, a little bit in the last podcast. I was at rock bottom, and I see a lot of people that come into Pastor Mike's lives that are at rock bottom, and there is, it's hard for somebody to say, well, you can only go up, but really, you have to go. When there's only one way to go up, there's only one way to go but up, and it's a process. You're not just going to snap out of it. I was on antidepressants. I was never like suicidal or anything like that, but I was pretty down in the dumps, and I still have bad mental health days at this time. But dealing with that, and then COVID came in. My wife's had multiple miscarriages. She wanted to have a baby as well, and we just don't know if that's going to be in the cards for us. But it was just been one thing after the other. But God, I do know that God's always there for whatever reason, and so I'm going to keep my faith. I'm going to keep that faith. I'm going to continue to try to do as best I can to be Christ-like, and I'm going to be the leader of my household. And I'm going to try to teach my daughter. And so I just feel like there's so many people that are, especially the failing marriages. You see that a lot. I'm depressed. Financial stuff. I mean, I've been through it. I've been through it, and it's just one of those things where, I just felt it needed to be addressed. And I mean, I just don't know, what more I can say on it. Is you gotta stay with it.
Yeah. If you could talk to Moose, the Moose now could talk to Moose, then what would you tell Moose?
God's not going to put you in a situation that you can't overcome.
Yeah.
Um, I think about, now that I'm more in tune with reading the Bible on a regular basis, I can see where some of um, the decisions I made, not being godly decisions, have led to consequences. Not because I'm being punished, but it's kind of like cutting the corners, like you're leaving out different steps. And but just like uh, there's blessings and everything, even stuff that's not great, that you feel personally. There's blessings that come out of that, and I truly believe my daughter is a blessing. I love her to death, and I'm just making, I just want to make sure that she has something I didn't have.
Amen. Amen. That's good because that's something we have to do when we went through that traumatic time. We have to look at the person we were during that time. And I always tell people you have to have a conversation with yourself. Doesn't mean you're crazy when you do that, but that part of you that it was left unhealed, maybe God has healed it. There's still parts. There's those wounds, those scars there, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're able to talk to that person, like with me, I had a lot of traumatic stuff when I was younger, and little Mike had never gotten resolution. And the only way that I healed was when I went and talked to him, and that was only by the help of the Holy Spirit. It wasn't no medium or weird New Age stuff. I'm talking about psychology. before we try to get into you talk to your younger self. No, I mean,
But you know the feelings I felt, when I was coming back to my faith, that feeling of emptiness was there, and it's hard to explain. Like, and people want to scrutinize you for that, but it's just hard to explain.
yeah,
It happens, and once I finally, when I started coming back to my faith, I was a little lukewarm about it. But once I kind of like dove in and I was all in for it, man, things have just been it's just been one blessing after the
did the Stephen Curtis Chapman song "Diving In" play? Does that?
other.
I'm diving in. I'm going deep. Sorry.
Hey, we are in that time frame as far as growing up, but no, it did not.
No, I'm just
So that's funny though. I don't like that. So
yeah, yeah. But no, bro. That see, people need to know that you struggled with that, that you went through those things, and it's going to help somebody else that went through a divorce that had those struggles, that had mental health struggles as well,
mhm.
and also, you know, this on the any of our lives that we've been on, mine or yours too. We have people that are dealing with miscarriages quite a bit, and we see that, and to know that you know how they feel, you know,
Yeah, and then I think a lot of times people don't realize that the man, from the miscarriage, it's affected.
yeah,
My wife's first one, I completely shut down, and the problem with that is we were both COVID positive, and we was right in the middle. It was before vaccine. It was before any of this stuff. It was still brand new, and she was doing through all this at the hospital, and I was here at home because they wouldn't let me in the hospital.
wow,
And so, I shed some tears. I just didn't want to talk to anybody. And of course,
yeah,
I'm losing weight because I'm not eating. It's just kind of, it's just so weird and ironic how that happens.
yeah.
So, well, tell me about, tell me about your faith, how you walk with it. Of course, you're a pastor, so you're on a little bit more of a microscope than I am.
Yeah.
But you also are dealing with some stuff like, I'm thinking about the pastors here at my church. We've got our church is it's a mid to large size church where I go to church. We're about 750 or so per week.
Oh yeah.
So we have multiple pastors, and at the top of my head, I can't think of one that has a special needs child or a child who's been diagnosed with autism. And I can just imagine, you're dealing with what's going on with the everyday life of being a pastor, and then I'm sure that it was just a shock to you and Jody whenever you found out about your daughter, what your daughter was going through.
Oh yeah. So with our daughter, she was diagnosed at 15, but we all always knew something was a little different. And we we lived in South Carolina uh, through many of her formative years when she was in elementary school, preschool, middle school. And you got to understand, in South Carolina, the pediatricians, we'd say, "Hey, we think something's a little different." No, it's a phase. It's a phase, and I'm like, um, this is not a phase, I don't think. There were signs there. She walked on her tippy toes, which is a huge
Mm-hmm.
sign of autism. If you're out there, you're like, my child's doing that. I'm not saying everyone that does it, but it's one of the biggest signs in like infants and toddlers that if they walk on their tippy toes or when they get to elementary school, if they're still doing that. She had some speech problems and some other things that went along with it. And then when we were in North Carolina, we found out her secondary diagnosis was OCD, and so we saw that really take form there. And there was a period of 3 months where for her to even go to school was difficult. She thought the ceiling was going to fall down. Just some very things that we would say, well, that's silly. It wasn't silly to her. It was so real. And so she had to go through life with that. She was bullied, but sometimes she didn't care because she was an island to herself. But as she got older, it did affect her. My daughter is beautiful. She's amazing, and we would classify her if we put it on the spectrum as level one.
Mm-hmm.
They do it by levels now. They used to call it Asperger's, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's called level 1, high functioning.
I'm gonna say she's very high functioning.
She's high functioning, yep. And so she's gonna be able to live on her own eventually. Uh,
Mhm.
she's 20 now, and our goal for her is to be on her own by 25. Um, and I know she'll do it. It's going to take a minute, and it's not because she doesn't have the skills to live on her own. It's the social skills to be able to survive on her own right now. And she's learning those. She's getting there. Her goal is to be a journalist. That's her main goal. She wants to do journalism with being a PR director, and I'm believing God will do that inside of her and through her. But she was diagnosed at 15. What really pushed us, she was in middle school. The girls were making fun of her, treating her different, and we said we really need to finally go ahead and bite the bullet and get her uh, diagnosed if she's got it. Well, she got diagnosed both with autism and OCD, and there were many countless nights where my daughter didn't sleep, where we didn't sleep either. Uh, just in 2022, my daughter, to be able to go to sleep at night, used to have to do a 2.5 hour routine every night, every single night, and that's involving me and mom too. Mainly mom. Um, my wife is a trooper, uh, because my daughter loves me and she's a daddy's girl, but there's some things only a mom can do.
Mhm.
So mom was there, helping her a lot during that time. So 2.5 hours now, her routines at nighttime are 5 minutes long. So she went from 2.5 hours to 5 minutes, and we give glory to God for that. But
Yeah.
in ministry, um, she does it add some stuff? It does, but I wouldn't take anything for it. Uh,
So how has that, how has that affected your not only your walk, period, your walk personally, but how you approach, the gospel, you approach Jesus Christ and everything, just as a family.
um, it helps us, believe it or not, to approach with more of an open, realistic viewpoint. Um, I love it. A lot of people don't like the TV show The Chosen, but what I love about The Chosen is how they portray Matthew. I don't know if
Hmm.
you've seen The Chosen, but on The Chosen, Matthew is autistic. They don't come out and say it, but you can tell without a shadow of a doubt
Right.
his actions, how he is. To just see, and if you read the book of Matthew, there's a possibility. We're not saying that he is, but it's more of an analytical gospel and things of that nature. But what it's done for us, it's taught us to smell the roses, to slow down, to understand that life is not as serious as we've made it out to be. It's
Hmm.
helped us in that way. Now, the seriousness of the gospel and salvation, of course, but we're talking about everyday life. And it's helped us to realize the small blessings, like my daughter is one of the moderators on my TikTok that helps, and she just overcome some fears with that just recently. That's been a big deal with her, but just seeing her grow in her faith has helped my faith, believe it or not, because my daughter is my world. Um, outside of Jesus, my daughter, she's got my heart, and nothing could ever change that. No diagnoses, no matter what. But bro, she's also overcome a lot of stuff, some stigmatisms that stigmas, not stigmatisms. She's got
She's got the eye stuff.
she's she's overcome some stigmas that have been placed on her, and it's been beautiful to see
That's good.
achieve that.
Yeah, I think that kind of listening to what you're saying versus kind of what I do is, the real world's out there.
Oh,
You
yeah.
whether it's autistic kids that are having to deal with bullies or whatnot, or you're trying to do your best to be Christ-like, and you're struggling because you don't get to see your children as much. And so, even today, I don't get to see my daughter as much as I like to. I'm a every other weekend dad. Except for the summertime, I get her for 4 weeks, and then I get her, sometime I get her for holidays, like extended time and holidays. But one of the things that I try to do is not only am I trying to lead with a Christ-like example, trying to show, this is why we do this, but I also allow her to have experiences. I want her to experience life. Well, I'm a season ticket holder in Tuscaloosa, and she doesn't go to every game because I don't go to every game. But depending on when we have her, and then depending on the time of the year, because Alabama in the middle of September on a day game is not a fun time to be at Bryant Denny Stadium.
No.
But we try to give her experiences like that. We've taken my daughter to New York, we've taken her to Gatlinburg, we've taken her to Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. One of the things I hope to do is take her to see my sister in Ireland. But I'm assuming it's the same thing with your daughter. There's that there used to be a billboard here in Birmingham, and I'm sure it was more of a national campaign. And it was, the billboard said, "Look at my disability," but the DIS was marked out with a red X.
Ability. Yeah.
Look at my ability. And my daughter's limited too because she had open heart surgery when she was 10 years old. So there's other things that I have to take into consideration, just like I'm sure there's other things you have to take into consideration. And so, I just think that the human element of somebody who, like yourself, who is a pastor, a senior pastor, or me, I've run a faith-based nonprofit. I'm now directing men's ministry at church. I lead a discipleship group. I try to go on mission trips. I'm trying to connect with different people around the world for the glory of God. We have everyday lives too. And I think that that's important for whatever level it is, especially when we're trying to relay our faith to our families.
Yep. I agree.
So, well, look, we're coming up on time for this episode. I don't want to keep people too long. We will have a part 2, though. We are going to talk a little bit more about our priorities with our families and our faith in the next episode. But if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, sharing this out to everybody, you'll see at the end of this podcast, you'll see some links. The links are to our Discord, which is called Rooted, which Mike has started, and we have hundreds of people in that group. Prayer requests, talking about faith, questions about faith, favorite worship. I mean, there's a whole lot of different categories in there. We've got our personal TikTok accounts. If you want to come in and join and kind of listen to what we do. Mike goes live every night at 9:00. He goes throughout the day as well. Some. We've also got our links to our Facebook and Instagram for this podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. The email is mikeandmoose2025@gmail.com. And other than that, I think we're ready to move on to episode number 3 and see everybody next week.
Yeah, that sounds good. There's one prayer request I need everybody to pray. If you're watching this at a later time, you will already know that the Thunder will be NBA final champions. But if you're catching this early, pray that they will win.
So
the finals, baby. Yeah.
So I will, and I end every one of my videos with this one little catchphrase. I just want to let you know, I'm praying for you. Take care.